And that's what we need to understand in our society. When people are doing violence against us, we have the right to protect ourselves.
Today, what do you think we've been doing today? What do you think we've been doing? You don't know what you're talking about.
Wouldn't it make more sense to spend taxpayer dollars on veterans than on encouraging travel to Tunisia?
Socialism failing to work as it always does, this time in Venezuela.
We've got a lot to cover today. Socialism sucks, is according to Vin Scully. Rip Vin Scully. There's a really interesting political story that I want to do a deep dive on. It might be a little dry, but it's super important to see the way that things work. The inflation relief bill is not going anywhere, and store owner defends himself. A hilarious clip of that coming up. All that and more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Thanks for tuning in. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from my parents' house in Chino Hills, California. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today it is August 3rd, the year of our Lord 2022. The new you in 22. If you haven't started that already, it's too late. Sorry, you missed the boat. But a lot of stuff, interesting stuff to come up today. Fascinating, just a big overall fascinating story in the world of politics. And by politics, I don't mean governance necessarily. I mean literally political theater being played in the Senate, which is the most respected deliberative body in all of the world, making, I don't want to say a mockery of the system, but, not entirely not that. But before we want to do that, because I want to get to, we're gonna go for a long stretch here on this burn pits victim bill that did pass the Senate. You might be thinking, what the heck is that? It is a super important bill that helps out our veterans who were exposed to burn pits, gasoline, and caused diseases, healthcare for them. We all agree on that, by the way. We all agree that that should be a thing, but there was some massive confusion over the week, and it really highlights an interesting facet of our political culture just in what the government does and what the government doesn't do. So we're going to get to that. It's going to be a little dry, so I wanted to play this. This is Vin Scully, who passed away yesterday at the age of 94. If you don't know who Vin Scully is, a longtime Dodgers announcer, called some of the most iconic games and plays in history. He will be missed, and also, anytime Vin Scully comes up, it gives me an opportunity to play one of my favorite clips from sports television. This is about a minute long. This is Vin Scully just musing in between batters. It is hilarious and super true and relevant to the modern society. If you haven't already, you're going to want to see this, and your friends are going to want to see this. Click the little like button down here, or the reaction button, the happy button, the sad button for the passing of Vin Scully. The little comment section, let us know what you think. But this, again, is one of my favorite clips of sports, but maybe even of all time. Check this out.
Carter at first, nobody out. 0-1. Perez, 25 years old, originally drafted by the Tigers, lives in Venezuela. Boy, can you imagine you're a young kid playing in the United States, you're from Venezuela, and every time you look at the news, it's a nightmare. A bunt attempt is missed. Runners were holding 0-2. Socialism failing to work as it always does, this time in Venezuela. You talk about giving everybody something free, and all of a sudden there's no food to eat. And who do you think is the richest person in Venezuela? The daughter of Hugo Chavez. Hello. Anyway, 0-2.
That's one of my favorite lines. You try to give everybody something for free, and all of a sudden there's no food to eat. And who do you think is the richest person in Venezuela? The daughter of Hugo Chavez. Hello. Anyway, 0-2. One of my favorite, again, sports clips, but probably clips of all time. I wanted to play that first. Wow, lots of people coming in on the comment line. Love that, man, says Linda. Yeah, we all do. There's that. I want to play that first, not to get it out of the way, but to give you some sort of carrot before the stick of politics comes in. This is just a fascinating story. I want to start off, now, first of all, if you're new to the way that politics works and understanding the mechanics of getting elected and elections, yesterday was big primary day. Some people won, some people lost, some issues won, some issues lost. We're not going to get into all of that. I'm sure that's being covered widely on any of the other news platforms you take in. But from a political standpoint, as a consultant, which is what I did for a very long time before getting into this on-camera talk show thing, there's a lot of things that people need to understand, not before participating in our political system, in our election system, but at some point. You need to understand the inner workings of the politics of governance. Government and politics are different things. Governance is civics, and you do that because you need to run a society. Politics is the art of getting into power. It is the most contentious sport in all of the world, as I was discussing with a friend last night, and it is all the stakes. This week, there was a bill in the Senate providing health care to burn pit victims in the military. And by that, it is burn pits were used in a bunch of different places to burn stuff, gasoline, equipment, bunch of different things. Bunch of different things got thrown into burn pits. And therefore, people got sick from it. Now, everybody agrees that people who served in our military, look at including Democrats, most of them, except for like the 10% fringe, it's like, we shouldn't have a military, who are just insane and you're never going to convince them of anything. But burn pit victims, everybody agrees we should take care of them. Legislation giving veterans exposed to toxic burn pits access to expanded health benefits passed the Senate Tuesday night amid an outcry from veterans and comedian Jon Stewart, who camped out in front of the Capitol steps since Republicans blocked the bill last week. Now, a lot has been said about people blocking, or the Republican side blocking that bill. That's what we're going to get into. The minutia in the politics of this particular item. Again, knowing that everybody agrees here. Now, Jon Stewart, if you don't know him, he hosted The Daily Show for like 15 years, maybe even 20 years. I'm not entirely sure. Widely known comedian, widely known lefty. But he does have a soft spot. Soft spot's not the right term. He does have a passion for protecting veterans, which is great. Regardless of the other liberal ideology that he holds, I'm with him on that, and so is everybody else. But this particular bill hit a snag last week when a bunch of senators voted against it, or said they were going to vote against it, raising some concerns about other things in the bill. If the bill was specifically and only regarding the burn pit victims, I think everybody would agree on it. But something that happens way too often in politics is they take a bill, and this happens on both sides of the aisle, they take a bill that everybody agrees on and then shove other random stuff in there, hoping that nobody notices. And if anybody does vote against it, they get to say, well, what are you, against veterans? No, I'm against the $400 million of other nonsense you threw in there that doesn't at all relate to the key component of the bill. This is politics 101. And that's what happened in this burn pit victim bill. Jack Posobiec, friend of the show who was on last week to talk about The View, was out on the lawn of the Capitol and wound up talking to Jon Stewart, and things got a little heated because Jon Stewart was upset that people in the Senate didn't want a bunch of fluff in there and were then holding up this bill. Watch this exchange with Jack Posobiec and Jon Stewart. This is kind of gnarly. Check this out.
Get this crap over the line.
No.
Because these people have suffered for 15 years. Because you're a
Look at them in the
troll.
face. Look at them in
You're
the
a
face.
troll.
I want the bill
You're
passed.
not in good faith.
I'm for the bill.
You're not in good faith.
So what's the problem? What
My
are you trying
question,
to do here?
my suggestion
What is your
is,
question?
What are you
John,
trying to do here?
What?
why is John, I'm not even against you guys.
What are you
Then
trying to
why
do?
the
Then
fuck
what are you doing?
Count to 10.
We went to his office.
a breath and count
These
to
people
10,
have
John.
already counted
Take a breath
to
and count to
15 years.
10.
These people have already counted to 15 years. Of course.
Then tell
We
them to
tried.
Okay. So just a little explanation of what's going on here. Jack is saying, hey, there are some concerns being raised by Republicans that are legitimate. I would like to talk about it. Jon Stewart lost his cool, and then Jack said, hey, I can set up meetings with these people. What you're about to see now is an exchange of Jack saying, would you meet with these people? And then they saying, we tried to meet with them. Here's the problem. There's a difference between trying to meet with them. If Jack sets up a meeting with the office staff in the Congress, they can actually go and have a meeting. What Jon Stewart and the rest of these people were trying to do, again, we're not against any of them in what they're trying to accomplish. What they did is camped out in front of their office and accosted senators in terms of wanting to meet with them. And guess what? They got refused. That's not how you set up meetings in D.C. That's not how this works. So that is what happened here. That's what's going on here if you're watching for context. Check this out.
They called the police.
We tried when he called the police on us.
Will you meet with McConnell? Will you meet with Toomey?
Do you understand? We've been doing this for years. Meeting with them.
Today.
What do you think we've been doing? What do you think we've been doing? You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about.
You're just screaming.
Here, let me explain it to you.
Explain it.
The House.
Do you want to meet with them?
Shut the f- up and listen.
What are you trying to do?
The House.
What are you trying to
Split
do?
the
meeting.
pact
We
up.
already went there. He said no. He does not want to meet with
All
us.
of these
He does not want to meet with
batteries.
us. He does not want to meet with us.
Let's do it.
Come on, man.
I will
This is
listen to
bullshit.
that.
We know it's bullshit. What are you
ambush
doing?
them.
All right, so tempers got a little bit heated, as you can see. Why did they get heated? Because all of those people were very passionate about getting healthcare for veterans, which we all should be. Again, nobody's disagreeing with them. What Jack and a couple other senators were saying, Jack is not a senator, but Senator Pat Toomey, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Marsha Blackburn, were all saying was, hey, there's other stuff in here that we don't like. We're not holding this bill up because we don't care about the veterans and the burn pit victims and any of that sort of stuff. Nobody is against them. But when people sneak in random stuff all the time, we are against that sort of thing. Now, this was then explained to Jon Stewart, in which resulted in this next video of Jack and Jon Stewart and this other guy, I forget his name. Sorry, dude. But coming to a truce and then going and meeting with the senators. Check this out.
This is Jack Posobiec. I'm here with Tim Jensen of Grunstyle, and
Hello.
Jon Stewart is also here. Jon Stewart and I have decided to come to agreement. Have we not, John?
Yes, sir. I lost my temper a little bit. I felt like I was being trolled, and I realized that the important thing is you just got to get this done for these guys and get them over the finish line to get the health care they need.
We're at 98%. Let's get it over the last 2%.
Please.
Is that fair?
Fair.
You shake on it?
7-5, brother.
Do or die.
Awesome. Okay, so they agreed, hey, this is about veterans, and maybe we shouldn't if there are other things being thrown in there, that's reason for adequate concern. Now, let me just read this a little bit from NPR. What ended up actually happening is the bill passed 86-11, ultimately drawing support from 37 GOP senators, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. It's now headed to President Biden's desk for his signature. The legislation known as the PAC Act would expand veteran health care eligibility to about 3.5 million people exposed to toxic burn pits while serving overseas. The pits, used to burn fuel, chemicals, and other waste, have been linked to certain illnesses because of the toxins presented in the smoke. Again, great. Nobody disagrees with that. Beyond aiding veterans in Iraq and Afghanistan, the bill would expand coverage to illnesses potentially linked to Agent Orange herbicide used in the Vietnam War. Last week, 41 senators voted against advancing the bill. This is the problem that I think people are having now. 25 of those Republicans supported another version of the bill last month. GOP senators, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, yada, 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 yada. The biggest objection was coming from Senator Pat Toomey, who sought to block reclassifying the billions of discretionary Veterans Health Fund spending as mandatory entitlements. Okay, we're getting into the verbiage here. The one word that changed from the last time they supported this bill was discretionary and mandatory. Toomey said that this bill is going to free up $400 billion underneath this spending caps that discretionary spending is subject to. What does that mean? Essentially, he says there's a ton of money in this bill that isn't going to necessarily be allocated towards helping veterans, and that is why we need to pause for some sort of reflection on this. I think Senator Rand Paul described that well in a speech that he gave on the Senate floor. Again, guys, I know that this is kind of a dry thing, but it's super important in the way that we look at our politics and understand what's going on in the political and legislative process. Watch this. This is Rand Paul presenting a pretty articulate argument for, hey, maybe let's not go crazy here and let's just take care of what we need to take care of. Watch this.
We must take care of our veterans and keep our country strong. This bill puts our economy, though, at risk by creating presumptions of service connection for the most common of ailments. For example, this legislation creates a presumption of service connection for Vietnam veterans for hypertension. But according to the CDC, 50% of men and 44% of women in the United States have hypertension. More than 60% of people over the age of 60 have hypertension. In total, the CDC estimates that 116 million Americans have hypertension. The legislation also creates a presumption of service connection for global war on terror veterans for asthma. The CDC estimates that 1 in 12 people have asthma, which is approximately 25 million Americans. This bill would cost hundreds of billions of dollars at a time when the national debt is climbing over 30 trillion and inflation is at a 40-year high.
What Rand Paul is saying there effectively is, hey, you guys are going to cover things or create a presumption of service for things that aren't necessarily related to any war, any veterans. Talking about, well, this is going to cover hypertension. Hypertension, high blood pressure, if you don't know what that means. Most people over the age of 65, I think he said, have hypertension. I think like half of Americans have high blood pressure, as he just stated in the statistics right there. What he's saying is some of this money is redundant. Now, here's where the politics gets interesting here in terms of elections and campaign fundraising. The bill ultimately passed, but last week there were 41 senators, Republican senators, that said, no, we don't want this to go through. Now, if you're not familiar with the Senate rules, in order to get out of the argument stage and into the voting stage, you need 60 votes. That's what the filibuster is. We're not going to explain the filibuster and all of that because Democrats are trying to get rid of the filibuster, which would be an insane thing to do. But it did not reach that 60 vote threshold to get to the actual floor for a vote. Now, why did senators change their mind? Because like we mentioned earlier in this article, the bill did eventually pass 86-11. Well, that's all for political purposes. It ended up passing with all of those presumptions in there that Rand Paul was hinting at. So why? Why did it pass and why did those Republicans switch their vote? Well, the agreement that the senators came to, Republicans and Democrats on either side of the aisle, came to was that Republicans that were against all of the nonsense in the bill would vote for it anyways if the Senate allowed a vote on 3 different amendments. If they knew the amendments weren't going to pass, why vote on them? I'll explain that in a second. Bottom line is, the senators rejected Pat Toomey's proposed amendment to the bill, as well as 2 others from Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Marshall Blackburn of Tennessee before moving to pass the vote. What Republicans did essentially in a political move was said, hey, we'll vote for this bill as long as we can get all of you Democrats on the record for voting against the amendments. What it's going to do effectively is provide campaign ad slogans. Republicans are going to get to say Democrats voted to spend $400 billion on something that we don't need in voting against the amendment. Because they want that political cannon fodder, they thought that that was a good trade-off to then vote for the bill ultimately, because like we're getting at the very beginning here, everybody agrees on this. I'm hoping this is kind of making some sort of sense in the way that this whole thing works. Essentially, the bottom line here, and this is coming back to my main and biggest point about politics, the government is bad at doing things and should do less things. But the last thing I want to play here is this Rand Paul giving some examples of where we could take the money from instead of issuing a new bill to spend more money that we don't have in a time of massive inflation. This is a pretty compelling argument. He said, take some money from USAID, which does some things that are ridiculous in terms of taxpayer dollars. Watch this clip.
That's why I propose that we pay for this bill by establishing a 10-year moratorium on foreign aid and dispersed by USAID, except for Israel. USAID is riddled with waste, and those dollars can be better put to use to help take care of our veterans' health care. Just this year, USAID unveiled a $50 million Visit Tunisia program to encourage more tourism in Tunisia. In 2016, USAID started a program to help the Afghan government help farmers as it cut checks to NGOs to fund Afghan farmers. The program paid for 72 farmers to receive drip irrigation, pipes, wheelbarrow, 2,000-liter water tank, and a 5-kilowatt generator for a cost of $87.9 million. USAID spent over $37 million to assist the Filipino government to get roughly 3 million Filipinos back to school. Maybe we ought to do the same in America. USAID devoted $20 million to teach the Laotian language. In another instance, USAID allocated up to $150,000 to send 10 Koreans to Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks to learn about climate change activism. That's a great use of our money. Wouldn't Congress rather spend the money on our veterans?
Yeah. Kind of a dry speech there, but the point he's trying to make is, hey, the United States government is spending millions of dollars to encourage tourism to Tunisia. Why? But that's essentially it. That was the trade-off. The Republicans that didn't want this to go through with all of the nonsense in it, and by nonsense, I mean arguably difficult legal banter, in order for them to pass it, they said, I want you Democrats on the record voting against taking money from somewhere else and using it. I want you to vote for spending it. That way, even though this bill passed that I don't like, I get to run commercials in the next election saying so-and-so voted to spend more money during high inflation. Politics for you, ladies and gentlemen. I know that was a long-winded way of working our way through that. For those of you who stuck with us, I appreciate you doing that because it's not quite over yet. This, I thought, was another good avenue for this. So if you're following this other bill that's going through, it is the, Inflation Relief Act that people are being asked about, that the White House is being asked about. This is another one of those political nonsense things. Now, again, back to the other point, everybody agrees in helping the veterans, but a lot of people don't know there's other stuff snuck in there that we don't like. This is a different type of political nonsense. This is pandering to your side. The Inflation Relief Act, which the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, I believe came out with a report. No, it was the Wharton School of Business that came out with that report that said, yeah, this is not actually going to help or work at all. But the Inflation Relief Act is set to do this: create a 15% corporate minimum tax. Corporations with at least $1 billion in income will have a new tax rate of 15%. Taxes on individuals and households won't be increased. Now, the obvious question to a lot of us that when we hear tax increases, when we hear that word, the same question that we think in our heads was asked by one of the reporters in the White House press briefing room. Check this out. Politics as usual. Now, by the way, 15% tax rate on corporations, that's not going to be a good idea for the reasons exemplified in this video. If you haven't already, would appreciate you clicking the little like button, the little share button. Really helps us out. Let us know what you think in the comment section. Maybe we'll bring it on here. Janet says, politicians are the biggest scam artists this country has. Correct. Watch this.
On the Inflation Reduction Act, so there's a corporate tax increase to a minimum of 15%. How confident is the president that the companies will not pass that cost on to people in the form of higher prices?
Look, the reason why we talk about we think the global minimum tax of 15 is, or the minimum tax, the corporate minimum tax of 15 is so important, is because you have 55 companies, corporate companies right now who pay absolutely nothing, who pay $0, and by doing this, we are fixing the tax loophole. It is important to do that. It is important to have a fairer tax system, and it is important to just for people to pay their fair share. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars profit that we are seeing these companies bring in, and not paying a cent, not paying anything for it. I cannot speak to your question that you're asking me. I cannot speak to that. What I can speak is to this legislation and why it's so important. And why we need to get it done.
So this is a strictly political talking point. Companies pay massive amounts in taxes, but also in salaries. Just FYI, if companies don't exist and they don't pay the government taxes, that's the least of your problems. The company's not paying employees to work and put food on their table and roof over their head is the bigger problem. So I don't understand the whole idea of pay your fair share. All right, do you want Apple to just close its doors and not make any money and fire all of their thousands of employees? Is that what you want to do? Like, what's the argument you're making here? But again, politics as usual, the idea of a minimum corporate tax rate is a good buzzword for people, regardless of how bad the policy actually is. We see this a lot, too, in the whole cancel student debt, which I was going to talk about today, but I wanted to go on that big, long political rant. So I didn't. We'll talk about that tomorrow. There's some fascinating statistics in this whole cancel student debt nonsense. There's a lot more in that inflation relief bill that's just political talking points, not really actually good at legislating anything. But in the limited time we have left, I wanted to move on to this. Here is the carrot after the stick of 20 minutes of discussing politics in the Senate. Quick justice for a robbery in Norco, California. Interestingly enough, very close to where I am now and very close to where I live. I have not been to this store particularly, but I have been to the area where this is, and it is funny to see. Now, if you haven't seen this video, it's been flying around the internet. I think he's an 84-year-old store owner at 2:30 in the morning was accosted by criminals trying to rob him with a gun. He then shot the crap out of one of the guys coming in, and they ran away screaming. This is a report from KTLA, Fox LA, one of the big local news stations. And I thought, I was just going to play the video of the store owner shooting the criminal, but decided to keep a lot of the commentary in there too, because it shows that not every place in California is woke and dumb. They do some man on the street interviews, man in the store interviews, women in the store. They talk to people in the community, and I think you're going to like what all of them have to say. You can be proud of some areas in California. Check this out. This is going to be this is a nice note to end it on. Criminals receiving justice. Also, if you haven't already, click the little like button, little share button. This is going to make you happy and laugh. So that's the reaction button you can click. And also, let me know what you think about the 80-year-old who defended his store in the comment section. Would appreciate that. Check this out.
A robbery suspect shot and wounded when an employee at a Norco market didn't hesitate to protect his business from a would-be crook.
An 80-year-old man defends his business after armed robbers storm into Norco Market and Liquor.
I guess he gets what he deserves, so peace is done.
Customers of this long-time Norco business have a lot to say about this armed robbery that ends with the good guy winning the battle.
The criminals are in control of everything right now, and the fact that they turned around and showed them what for, I think it's amazing.
Everybody's brazen and thinks that they are owed everything and that they could do whatever they want, and it's not right to do that to people.
More businesses should be armed like that and defend their businesses like that.
The shooting happened on Sunday at 2:47 a.m. in the 800 block of 6th Street. The owner was standing right here watching all of the action on the security camera. As soon as he saw one of those guys pull the mask over his face, he knew trouble was headed his way.
He just prepared himself. He prepared himself and he stood right here and he just aimed. He aimed and shot.
The owner shot his rifle and hit the robber in the arm. Not a surprise to some customers.
You know, I'm not for gun violence, but he wasn't the one he wasn't the one doing the violence. The people that came in were the ones doing the violence. And that's what we need to understand in our society. When people are doing violence against us, we have the right to protect ourselves.
I've seen him a couple of times while I've been here, and honestly, I can kind of expect that from him. He seems like a pretty bad old man.
So, interesting. Good story coming out of Corruptifornia. Not everywhere in California is as woke as you think, even though a lot of it is. But that was an interesting story, again, in the area that Southern California. Kathy says, store owner is a rock star. Ethel says, he is my hero. Yeah. Hero business owner. We all need to stand up. Yeah. Awesome. Well, anyways, ended it on a nice note. It says the screaming. Good for him. Make these criminals think twice, says Gail. Lana says, Corruptifornia. Love it. That's not an original term, but I do have t-shirts that say Corruptifornia. Go check them out on my Instagram, and you can buy. I think they're relatively cheap too. You too can have a Corruptifornia t-shirt. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so this is, sorry, last thing. This is good to hear from the locals. That's what I really wanted to get on there. The videos making the rounds is great, but also the local community saying, yeah, screw these criminals. This is great. Go ahead, take them out. Yeah. Valerie says there's no way that store's getting robbed again. All right, I can read these comments for days because I appreciate all you commenting and doing all that stuff. I got to stop though because there's too many of them going, yeah, shoot the bad guys. So we'll leave it all there. Appreciate you tuning in today. I know it's we're a little kind of rambunctious since we're not in the dingy bunker, but you know, we're making it happen. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media accounts. I already forgot who commented the Corruptifornia thing. There are Corruptifornia t-shirts in for sale at my Instagram account and my Facebook account. The running joke, the gag of the day that people, if you stick around and watch the entire show, know that the Facebook on the Chiron is still wrong. Don't worry, that's still incorrect. But you can follow me and just type in JOBOB pretty much anywhere. You'll be able to find me. And you can get a Corruptifornia t-shirt at Facebook or Instagram if you so choose. That's going to do it for us today. Tomorrow, I do want to talk about more of the cancel student debt. For some reason, it's making a big comeback. I think that's because on August 31st, the moratorium on paying student loans officially expires, and people are saying, just get rid of the student debt. Okay, cool. I think we should get rid of student debt the second we also get rid of my mortgages. Any debt that I have, I would like the government to just get rid of. Why stop at student debt? Let's get rid of all of it. Obviously, I'm kidding. That would be an insane thing to do. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow and where that is coming from leading up to elections. Maybe we'll talk about some of the primaries that happened last night. Not super interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll get to it. That's going to do it for us today. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in as we are on the road here. Appreciate you listening. See you tomorrow. Same time, probably same place. God bless America.